Hello and welcome. You are watching our weekly podcast, The Weekly Brief, and what a week it has been. We thought that on this edition of The Weekly Brief, we will actually discuss the union budget. But guess what? Just a day after the union budget, we saw something on the night of Monday from none other than US President Donald Trump. And of course, you've guessed it, our big story for this week's podcast is the India-US trade deal, where US President Donald Trump has promised to slash tariff from 50%. He mentioned 25%, but there's a little bit of a nuance there, from 50% to 18%. That's all we know pretty much, because everything else that the US President had written in his Truth Social post has neither been confirmed nor denied by the Indian government. So Rakesh and Shri, thank you so much for being here on yet another edition of the Weekly Brief. Rakesh, to you first. We know that Indian tariffs are coming down from 50% to 18%. Do we know anything else at this moment for sure?
Well, I mean, there are two versions to the story. The Trump post suggests there are a lot more information available. Government of India has rejected that. It is not that it has confirmed either way. It says we have not given zero duty. We have not given any concessions on agriculture. So my point is that, first and foremost, it's a deal. Any deal, there is a give and take.
Right.
And this 18% has a certain perspective. One, that it is in the lower bucket.
Yeah.
And second, that it is in lesser than countries where we have an advantage in terms of textile, gems and jewelry and leather.
Right.
That's a significant gain. So, that 18% gets a bigger incentive from our export economy perspective.
Right.
That's what we know. We don't know. So my view is that we have a premature articulation on this entire piece, because the deal word has not been used in Prime Minister Modi's tweet.
That's right.
Nor has the deal been used in Piyush Goyal's press conference.
That's right.
And he further consolidated and confirmed what we are trying to say is that the deal is yet to be. So there is a fine print. So we must wait. This rush of advertisements that is happening in the newspapers, I think it's a waste of money.
It's a waste of money, the rush of advertisements. Well, I don't think that is anybody's big concern right now. The concern really is, the issues that Rakesh has pointed to, that the US President, let's break it down. The US President has said that India is going to slash tariffs on US exports to zero. Donald Trump has also said that India will stop buying Russian oil. Donald Trump, in the same breath, has said that we will increase our purchases of American energy. We will also potentially add Venezuela to the mix. At the same time, he has also mentioned the term agriculture. We'll come to agriculture, the holy cow, if I can call it agriculture. But among other things, he's also said that India will do $500 billion worth of purchases without giving a timeline. Now, Rakesh is saying that the government has rejected zero duties, but I don't think the government has as much as rejected the zero duty claim, but continues to say that we will keep our dairy and our agriculture sector protected. Protected may mean 1% tariff, 2% tariff, 5% tariff, no entry for US goods. It's still a little bit of a flux, and that uncertainty, while there's a certainty on the number 18%, the uncertainty on all the other aspects is something which we don't have answers to. I understand the joint statement will take a while, but the US President has given so many details, true or false, we don't know at this moment, but the Indian government has been fairly guarded. Do you think it's time to not keep that guard up all the time and just tell the market, tell the investors, tell companies what is in it for them?
So, Karthik, if you look at the original Truth Social post of President Donald Trump, which triggered the whole talk of a trade deal, if you look at the lot of the components of it, I think most of it is actually a wish list from President Trump in terms of how the US-India deal should look like. But subsequently, there are reports that have come, statements from the Indian government. For example, Piyush Goyal yesterday said that there might be some sort of first tranche of this deal that happens, let's say, shortly, but the full deal will probably take till mid-March for it to get signed. Parallelly, we also had reports of Ajit Doval meeting with his counterparts and the trade negotiators in the US and telling them that India is really not in a tearing hurry to do the deal if it means compromising on some hard lines that it can't compromise on, for example, on agriculture or energy security. And the reporters, he's told US that India is willing to wait out President Donald Trump's term in office if need be. So I think this is a good signal which the Indian government has sent out, and the fact that we managed to sign a deal with the EU without including agriculture in it, which is very important from our perspective, because unlike, let's say, European or American farmers, our farmers are at subsistence level. For them, allowing a flood of foreign produce could literally mean that they don't have a livelihood. So I think these are non-negotiable. And it's fair to say that there is intent on both sides to come to a deal. The contours need to be worked out. What is kept in, what is kept out, that needs to be worked out. But I think there is a rapprochement. And Karthik, that's an important signal which the market has taken. And the sentiment that we see all around, Rakesh talked about the full page ads in newspapers, congratulatory ads. I think it's a reflection of that from a position where no conversation was happening between two leaders to now they've spoken and the teams are now working together to hammer out a deal. So that's a big move forward in the stalled US-India deal talks, Karthik.
All right, let's now dive a little deeper into, Rakesh, the agriculture question, because that is something which the opposition also wants answers from. We as journalists are also seeking answers from the government. And of course, the entire country also at some stage needs to understand if the Indian government has given some concession, how much concession, and if the Indian government has not given concession, then what is US President Donald Trump talking about? But overall, the entire agriculture piece has been protected for as long as India became independent. And we've seen clashes at WTO. We've seen other trade deals pretty much, not take off, sometimes take off, get stalled, not come through on India's urge and India's potential need perhaps to protect the agriculture sector. The question that you and I were discussing offline was, if now, then when should India liberalize its agri sector?
Absolutely, Karthik. I think first and foremost, I think, the Indian media, including all of us, are also in a tearing hurry to try and get the details out. These are very protracted negotiations. Look at the India-EU deal. It came from 2007 till 2026. It takes time. There are vested interests, there are entrenched interests, there are sensitivities. So let's not push either the US or the Indian government to try and give details when they're not ready. Sure. That's my core point. First, and then, coming to agriculture, it's an extremely important point. Agriculture is a holy cow even in the US. It's a global holy cow. But India has a significant problem. We have 45% of India's population living off agriculture, and its returns on the GDP are falling. So, do we continue to lock 45% of our population in a low-yielding return? Or do we look at bringing them up? India's agriculture has done pretty well in the last 11 years, thanks to a great monsoon and some great policy making. We have 4.4% average versus 7.7 or 8% of the overall GDP. So in that sense, we have a surplus. We have a surplus with US. We have an overall surplus in agriculture. Our stocks are very large, so that we are feeding 80 crore people free ration. So is this the right time to bring about a reform? To my mind, I'm a votary of reform now.
Okay.
There is a pressure from the US, there's a pressure from EU. We kept it off for the EU deal. How long can you keep it off?
Absolutely.
And I am seeking media's role, including mine, yours, everyone else's, and all civil society to push the political environment for reform in agriculture.
Okay.
We had a great, farm law, which was rolled back because of political compulsions. Now, this argument, there is need for stakeholder engagement. There is no end to stakeholder engagement. Did 1991 reforms happen because of stakeholder engagement? There was no stakeholder engagement.
And or the Green Revolution or Operation Flood, for that matter. There would have been stakeholder engagement, but at the end of the day, there was consensus which yielded results.
No, consensus is a very tricky word, Karthik. It traps us into a democratic, dividend, but it fails reforms. How do you define consensus? There was a series of meetings even on agri reforms. A section of farmers were involved, state governments were involved, but then still, a section of the farmers, a very small marginal section of farmers who essentially were built to be the bigger farmers. They came in large tractors. There is the other side of farmer story where there are, agriculture suicides, which is a sad thing. To put India-US agri piece in context, let me just give you some numbers. Without the deal, the exports from US to India and agri piece have been rising. We have a surplus with them, and ours are falling because of the last 1 year's tariffs. So in that sense, heavens will not fall if we use this opportunity to, so to say, trigger a reform and go back to the farm laws and remove the regulatory cholesterol that has gotten into the supply chain management.
Okay, Sri, to you now.
And the opposition must rise to the occasion and not stall the reforms.
Okay, opposition must not stall the reforms, but opposition is literally what is asking for what are the concessions that the government has given on the agri sector. So, Sri, to you now, we are running out of time. I want to understand, while Rakesh mentioned agriculture has grown 4.4% last financial year, this ongoing financial year, the Indian economy is growing 7.4%. So, agriculture not keeping pace with the overall economic growth momentum that we are seeing in the country. Agriculture continuing to be subsidized and no contribution to taxes So while I understand reforms are required, these reforms must happen how soon for India to actually either capitalize on its agri output, make it more competitive with competition entering in the Indian market, or potentially pushing farmers out of farming activity, unproductive farming activity, and finding jobs elsewhere. But then the question is, where are the jobs elsewhere?
Exactly. So structurally speaking, Karthik, the need for reform in agriculture is decades old. It's not today's. It should have happened decades ago. But the reality is you can't do a trade deal. You have to do a trade deal given the current structural framework that we have. If millions of farmers are going to be impacted by us blindly opening the agri sector to exporters from America and Europe, then that is something which no political party, the ruling party, can afford. Because like you said, there are no jobs. Do you want a human catastrophe in India's rural markets where people
But
who already
nobody
don't
is
have
recommending unregulated opening. I'm saying just at last.
yeah, so that has calibrated opening.
That's right.
But how much of the calibrated opening is possible given the current framework is something the government will have to weigh and see. I don't think we are even talking of a blanket ban on everything agri-produce. For example, I'm sure all of us are already buying California apples, we're buying grapes, we're buying so many different things, we're buying kiwis from New Zealand and Australia.
Oil, cotton.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
and remember there were duty cuts, in the previous budget, not the latest budget, on these three items which possibly led to a greater export value.
Sure.
We still have a surplus, about $3.1 billion.
So what India can do is to commit, let's say over a 10-year period, this is the framework we're going to adopt. Yeah, so you can't do it overnight.
And itemized sort of
we must have a roadmap for opening up of the agriculture sector, but it cannot be done overnight, it can't be done today.
Tax-rich farmers make farming more productive by
that's
bringing
on
in technology
our side.
on our side, and then also make it competitive for the world to face.
Correct. All right. Okay. So no easy answers here, but some answers definitely required. With that, we will slip into a very short break. But coming up on the other side, we will talk about something really unfortunate that hit the headlines this week. Children, teenagers jumping off balconies and committing suicide just because they fell in love with a video game. What is going on in India? That after this short break.